Hey everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Life Collab. This podcast is made up of unique voices and real conversations about leading, laughing, loving, and living freely. We are so glad that you could join us, and our hope is that we can help you experience freedom. So let's hear about today's topic.
Welcome back, y'all, to the FLC Collab. This is episode 5. And really, this is like a part 2 of what we had talked about in our last episode. We had left off on a high note, a real high note, just talking through intimacy, the theology of intimacy and what you should be doing. We leaned on some words like yada and what that meant, and really just some real good stuff. So what I want to do this episode is we've got Dr. Alvian back. If you could just tell everybody who you are once again, and we'll dive back in. Not the abridged version, because we got so much to dive in.
The super slim one, right? Okay, so I do relationships as a living on multiple levels. Own a human relations consulting firm, do private coaching and counseling. I actually specialize in infidelity for couples. So I love dealing with conversations that really get to the root of the issue, and the fact that there's virtually no place that you can go that you can't get back from with the right kind of support. And do also know, I always like to give a little nugget. Your marriage is a field. Be careful what seeds you allow to be sown inside of it.
Come on, that's good.
So when you are going through something in a relationship, even if it's prior to marriage, make sure that you are getting godly counsel, the right kinds of folks. And Pastor Freddie said in a previous episode, look, you know a tree by the fruit that it bears. Check that fruit before you allow anybody to plant any seeds in your field, okay? Because you don't want weeds where there should be apple trees, okay? So I get to do this stuff for a living, and I absolutely love it.
And we are excited to have her. Like, I wish we could have just recorded all of our conversations, but there's some stuff you ain't ready for just yet. Not just yet. We'll get there at some point.
We'll get there.
But hey, there was a lot of questions that came in through this whole thing, and so I want to make sure we address some of the specific questions that people had asked. One, I feel like this episode probably is super practical. One was a question of a spouse that says, hey, my spouse and I, pretty much, we're both Christians, we're both believers, but how do I get my believing spouse to come to church with me on Sunday? Like, is it important, and how do I do it? Like, all of those things.
Well, so what's interesting about that is that Matthew and I actually got saved at different periods of time inside of our marriage. So for those of you who don't know, we're in our early 40s, and we've been married for 23 years. So we got married in our early years of college, actually. Okay, so he was a sophomore and I was a junior when we got married. So we did this thing all the way wrong, and it turned out all the way right. But because he got saved after I got saved, we went through a season of time where we were at very different spaces. And he lived next door to his best friend, whom he refers to, and we both refer to as his brother. And they spent more time together than I spent with him a lot of times. There was a difference in our maturity levels. He used to play video games all the time because we were young. And I used to call the video game the mistress. You know, like it was just, there were a whole lot of distractions inside of the relationship. And I remember when I finally decided to give my life to the Lord, it was one Sunday that yet again he was not going to church with me. And I was complaining to God about the fact that here it is, I'm going to church. We had a small child at the time, and people think I'm a single mom. And I was like, Lord, do you see him? You see what he's doing? I was going through the whole 9 yards, and I remember God arresting me in my steps, and he said, daughter, I waited for you for 24 years. You can wait for him for 24 months. And it was so convicting in my spirit that I understood that I was too focused on what he wasn't doing rather than what I was doing. That when the Bible speaks to the believing spouse being able to sanctify her partner, you know, like we have way more power than we acknowledge as women. And I'm not talking about the power to manipulate. I'm talking about the power to influence. And manipulation and influence are two sides of the same coin. You know, the thing that is the distinction between the two of those is the intent.
That's so good.
When my intent is pure, then I am influencing. When my intent is flesh-based, then I am manipulating. And my goal and God's goal for us is that we influence our partners by the way that we conduct our lives. When we are so focused on living for God, we spend less time focusing on what our spouse isn't doing. And we see so much more of what they are doing. God will deal with your spouse in time. And I'm not saying that it's not going to be challenging and that you won't feel some type of way about it. I'm not discounting any of those realities. But what I am saying is that when we stand before God, we are not giving an account for our spouse's life. What we are giving an account for is how we lived before our spouse. So I need to make sure that I'm doing what I need to be doing. And if I'm doing that thing right, God will handle the rest of that. So it may not be easy. I'm not saying that it is, but I would just encourage whomever that is to focus on your walk with the Lord. Let God handle the rest of that, and make sure that you are not creating more barriers than you are bridges by your judgment about what he is or isn't doing.
So if y'all didn't catch it from the first episode we did with Dr. Alvin, like get your notepad out and make sure you're it's nuggets of wisdom.
If I say nuggets, is it the word?
Gosh. So here's one of the things you said, Alvin, was about you and Matt, how you guys started off your journey. And you said we started it off all the way wrong, but it ended all the way right, right? Or it's not ended, it's just really
it's
beginning.
all the way right now.
It's all the way right.
But we got to handle it so that it stays that way. Right?
So for those folks who are... This is the challenge. There's a lot of questions here that talk about, well, how do I know that this person is the one? Is there such thing as a soulmate? And what these are a lot of questions like, well, how do I know when it's right for me to make a move from just dating or we're kind of friends, dating to courtship or courtship to engagement or whatever? How do we counsel folks who are at the beginning stages here of relationships and the beginning stages of maybe where you and Matt were, and like not so much where you are now, but how did you navigate through that the journey? Right?
That's a great question.
It was a messy process. So to suggest that it wasn't would be totally disingenuous. What I will say is that the wisdom of that experience has informed a lot of how I would counsel someone or coach someone at this point. First, I would say that you need to evaluate whether or not the person that you are pursuing, this is assuming that you're a believer, because all bets are off if you're non-believers, okay? Because you can't use rules, you can't use checker rules in a chess match, all right? So you have to know where you are. Are we playing checkers or are we playing chess? Chess is a very strategic game. So you are thinking more than just this singular move, but 3, 4, 5, 6 steps beyond this particular moment. And so when I'm choosing a partner, I have to be thinking about who it is that is leading me closer to God. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing that's going to be true for us as believers is our walk with the Lord. So if you're choosing a partner that you find is a greater distraction to your relationship with God than they are a greater encourager, supporter, nurturer of, you already know you're on shaky ground. You know, so we have to pay attention to what our partner, both ourselves and what our partner's walk with God is like as a believer to determine whether or not this at the fundamental level can work. I am not saying that alone is going to make it work because every believer is not meant to be with the other believer, you know, but it is to say that at a base level, we need to make sure that we're effectively vetting our partners. Too many of us are allowing ourselves to get our flesh ahead of our faith. And in so doing, our flesh is the one that is counseling us about something that is going to be a long-term walk. So if your flesh is talking to you, you're only going to be prepared for a sprint. If your faith is talking to you, you will be prepared for the marathon. So we have to make sure that we know
my fingers hurt.
what is talking louder. So in a room full of voices, your faith has to be the loudest sound inside of that room. And we can't also, particularly as women, because we're often defined by our ability to get a man, keep a man, the list goes on and on, right? But you can't allow exterior forces to determine your self-worth. That's right. So you are not defined by whether or not you have a man. And you can't be settling for something less than what it is that God has for you. Because to settle for less than what it is that God has for you is to say that God is less than his ultimate self. So somehow you've got to supplement God. Now you already know that is not biblical. Right. You know, so we have to trust God to be able to bring into our lives the person who is meant to be with us. But we can't get ahead of God and then complain about what we end up with. So we have to make sure that we are patient enough to allow the fullness of God to be made manifest, because sometimes the reason he's not here yet is because you're not ready. It's not just because he's not ready, but it's because we have to be wives before we become wives. Your husband is being prepared to be a husband. So don't meet him as a boy and then expect him to be a husband. You need to let God finish his work in him the way that God needs to finish his work in you. So patience is a major factor in the process. Just don't get ahead of God.
So what about what about this aspect too? Because I think this is kind of like a lot when it deals with singleness or dating or trying to find that person or becoming that person. As we're growing, what about the person who is a believer, but the one that they are into or they are dating, looking to court, is not a believer, and the thought pattern is, well, I know the Lord, I can just help bring them in. I can just be the one that shows them, and then hopefully they can come to know Jesus through that, and we can have a great marriage and great family and all that kind of stuff. What do we say to people like that? Because I think that's a huge question, and I know a lot of young people, especially millennial generation, even younger, that's kind of where we are because it's hard to find somebody in church. It's kind of like the biggest things you hear a lot. So I don't know.
Hashtag no.
Yeah. Right. Can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
I'm just thinking about that because in the
20-something
years in ministry, that having observed people, you fall for somebody without having the clear criteria first.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, if you start with a clear criteria, as a believer, a Christ follower, it should start with someone who shares your faith.
Right.
If you have that on the front end, that's actually going to filter out a lot of...
Exactly.
My personal experience, in observation, not experience, but my personal observation has been missionary dating doesn't work. And there are exceptions. I know people that led their wife to Christ. We have a couple in our church that are amazing. Now one of them is on our church staff. And when they met, one was a believer, one was an atheist. And the believer led the other to Christ before they began dating and became married. As friends, but that's the exception, not the norm. The problem with missionary dating is what I've heard it called, is that now my relationship was, if I'm not a follower of Jesus and I meet this woman and she is, and now I'm going to church with her, I'm this and that because I'm interested in her, and then I meet Jesus, now something has happened, which is an interesting dynamic. What happens if her and I break up?
Right.
At some level, my faith has been filtered through my experience with her. And I've just seen that often that with the breakup comes also the disassociation with the relationship with the Lord because they're tied together at that point.
That's true.
And I think, I'm not saying that happens all the time.
Right.
I'm not saying there's not exceptions to that. This has just been the observation I have made over the 20-something years of ministry. More often than not, as soon as they break up, you stop seeing that person come around. And I think it convolutes things instead of letting God do his work first.
And I would say to that, I totally agree with Freddie, that you have to, it is possible that you could meet the person that's meant to be your person before they have come to the fullness of who he or she is. That's totally possible. All I'm saying is that we don't elevate the relationship to a level that the spirituality has not met. So if my growth spiritually has not met the level necessary to be your partner, then there's no reason to give you a title before you have the credentials to support the title. So we don't get jobs. If the job says that a bachelor is required, required. You don't get to show up with a GED and be like, I'll catch it soon, I
Yeah,
promise.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
right.
like you
That's
are
so
expected
good.
to
Very
have the
good.
bachelor
Very
degree to
good.
be able to qualify.
it.
So you may want the job, and that's fine. And we're all for the aspiration for you leveling up. But what I'm saying is I can't hire you before you finish that degree.
Right. That's
good.
So when you and I may meet, and I think that you're wonderful and you're fine or you're beautiful, and we have wonderful chemistry and all of that, but fundamental to who I am is my relationship with God. And I would never want that to be a problem between us. So until that is a part of your fabric for yourself, then we can be friends, walking this enjoyed and beautiful relationship together as friends. But I can't elevate you to a job that you don't have the credentials for.
Yeah.
See, but I feel like, I know I'm jumping in on this, but I feel like that while you're creating so many strong boundaries, you have these strong values. I think you're communicating in that kind of a stance that you're taking when it comes to that relationship. I almost feel like it's sad to say, but that's kind of unheard of. It's unheard of for a woman or a man to almost have that and say, well, until this is who I'm settled in this, because everyone is in this strong pursuit to find bae, to find the one, to find, and so it's that game where people like that are looking at us saying, well, of course you'll say that because you're married. Like you have all this stuff. So, you don't know what it's like nowadays or how it is. And so I almost I feel that pain, but I almost share that same testimony where it's, you having those strong boundaries. And like Bob always says, man, finds a wife, finds a good thing. Well, I think, you lining yourself up with the Lord, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going out and searching, but God just opening your perspective to see the right one and to see the one that's near and around you. So you said it earlier about focus on your flesh or your faith, elevating that faith perspective. So God, I really want to see with your eyes. Help me to find that right one and then move from there. So.
I think one of the things too that what you're hitting on is this. It almost goes a step even before that. Is that we say it all the time. But you show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
That's right.
There's this real sense that who your community is or who your community is not is pretty much what you're gonna do. Like it's everything you're gonna live into. So I feel like one of the challenges I've seen. I work with the young adults, kind of spend some time with that. One of the challenges I've seen is that all of them are in this community where we're almost trying to live double lives, right? These double lives. Well, I want my faith, but I don't really want my faith. I want to do this, but I really don't want to do this. And I think that the challenge is if we had community, like, so my wife and I, we had a community that were saying like, this is what you signed up for. Right. Like you signed up to live, pure. Like you signed up to actually date differently. You signed up for this. And so if we almost, and I'm not saying be dogmatic, but I'm saying as Christians, like what if we took a stance that says, yo, this is what our community is going to look like. And I'm not saying you're not accepted. I'm saying that people have processes, people have journeys. We all have journeys ahead of us, but this is my community. And also, I'm also saying in my community that I'm giving you license to hold me accountable. I'm giving you license to say, hey, bro, that's actually not how you should probably be acting. Hold on. Like, I remember this. This is it's just like fresh for me because I remember prior to my father-in-law would say, hey, call me before you go see my daughter up at her school. And I'm like, this guy's got to be kidding me. Like 18, 19 years old, what are you talking about? But when I look back at it now, it was this built-in accountability. And I never forgot that. I remember the story of my wife and I were home and at her house and nobody else was home. And so I had to take the initiative, but I said, you know what? We're going to peel those potatoes. We're going to prep dinner, but we're going to peel those potatoes in the car. Because if we go in the house, I kind of know me. I'm not that strong. You look good. I know how to feel. Let's peel some clothes off. So I just,
that's true though, man.
I think there's this community. There's this
we can turn anything.
It's community. It's really for me as I think about 3 C's. I always think about these C's, but there's this community, there's counsel, and then there's honest communication. I think you hit on it last episode, but this idea that you got to have a real community around you, but you've got to also be open to wise counsel. Like who are the folks that have healthy relationships? I think that's one of our challenges too. That we are idolizing unhealthy relationships. We're idolizing celebrity relationships. And some of them have great relationships, but we idolize these people with relationships. And it's like, that's not really what I want. That's not really what I desire, So
Yeah,
my
but
2
see,
cents.
freedom of choice does not provide freedom of consequence. Okay, like
That's good.
so, like
You preach it.
you
Right.
can do
Come
what
on.
you want to do.
Anytime.
good.
Yep.
But do
That's good.
understand that there are consequences that
Right.
come with doing exactly what you're talking about, Kyle. That if I really want to be with someone and nobody really does this thing anymore, where
yeah.
we line up their values and we make sure that everything is congruent and all of that, and I totally agree with you. They don't do it. But the consequence of choosing not to do that is all the mess that comes
Right.
with
The drama.
trying
Yeah,
to be able to make something work, and you're trying to fit a square into a circle. You know, like, and it happens all the time because we got ahead of what it is that God had for us. And it's not to say that there's no way to ever recoup. We have an incredible God who can do all kinds of things. We're not saying that. But you do not have to climb up the mountain with 22 bricks in your backpack when it turns out that there was an elevator. You know, like there are other ways to be able to get there.
I love that.
You know, like, so how we choose to do things. And the one thing I will also say, when you're choosing a partner, particularly when dating, find out what he or she saw as a marriage model.
Yeah.
It
That's
a great
matters
question. Wow, that's a really good
what
question.
they have seen, and that
What
and
does that mean
in
to you?
ways
Yeah, wow.
that you will never understand until you're finally inside of it. How did they see conflicts resolved?
Yeah. Yeah,
Did they see avoidance rather than communication? Did they watch manipulation take place inside of the relationship? Were there unrealistic boundaries? Was a parent
Yeah, good point.
completely, because there are various levels of fidelity. There's financial fidelity too.
Yep.
Was one of the parents financially cheating on the family? As in, you're spending money on all kinds of things that are destroying our ability to
so
maintain a financial stability in our household? What was normal to that individual? Because whatever he or she has seen will be their default zone. So even though they can be doing really good things right now, the default zone is a space that you're going to have to navigate. So it matters what it is that our partners, and that's why friendship is so important, because that's when we start to find out the real stories. Because everybody can tell a good story when we're on the campaign trail, but after you vote,
Good.
Come on.
you got what you chose.
Exactly.
There you go.
So, hey, y'all, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, really want to dive into more of this stuff, really talking about some toxic relationships. How do I navigate toxic relationships? And I want to lean in a little bit more too, because there's some folks that listen that just really deal with, you talked about in one episode, fantasy and reality. I have a spouse or a significant other that's actually walking in this fantasy land. How do I help them? Can I help them?
That's a
All
great
those
question.
things. All right, so we'll come right back.
Hey, what's going on? I'm Randy. I am the online campus pastor for Freedom Life Church, and I want to talk a little bit about flconline.org. I'm going to say it again, flconline.org. That is how you get to our online campus. And if you cannot attend one of our physical campuses, you can definitely join our online campus at flconline.org. We stream the full weekend experience. We don't miss anything out. You can even join life groups online throughout the week, and we meet virtually for that as well. There's so many cool ways that you can be a part of it. On the weekend, we have a chat room that hosts are there live in real time, dialoguing, talking, taking live prayer requests. You can give financially. There's so many cool ways that you can be a part of what's happening at Freedom Life Church, even if you're not here physically. So go to flconline.org and check out our online campus today.
Hey, welcome back, y'all. Hey, we are jumping back into this topic on relationships, and we've talked about sex in one episode, and we kind of leaning a little bit more into it here. But one of the things that we left off with was we were talking about, just journeying through relationships. The thing I wanted to lean on just for a second is how do we help someone who's in a spot where they're saying, hey, this is all great, but you guys are all married and everything else. How do I deal with my singleness? How do I actually deal with my singleness in a healthy way? Right. What do we got?
Hope and pray. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, for me, I think I think we were talking a little bit during the break, but we're in a society, we're in a culture where you know, we've just been talking about how affirmation is such a part of like social media. The kids that are coming up now, like, you know, how long streaks they have on Snapchat, that every day I get a touch point with this person, with this many people for this many days. These are my streaks, you know, like how many likes did my photo get on Instagram, you know, like how many shares did this, you know, it's constant affirmation from others. Yeah. And I think part of what's getting lost in that culture is the idea that I don't need others to be enough. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think what I often see in the young people and the single people, whether young or older in the church, is that sometimes there's a compromise that happens because it's the fear of being alone that I will settle for less than just so I don't have to be alone. And I think that we miss the opportunity that being single provides us. You know, Paul talked about being single in a very positive way. The Apostle Paul said, I wish that you would all remain single as I am. However, if you must marry, go for it. Now he said it's his opinion. Right. I don't agree with his opinion. But I do understand that there's an intimacy with the Lord that is so foundational to any healthy relationship. Like until I'm okay with it being just me and Jesus, I'm not going to be the best version of myself with somebody else. Yeah. And I say that over and over in a bunch of different ways because I've seen it. And, you know, I've walked through some of that in my own life. I've lived. I think it's important to realize that singleness is an opportunity to really deepen and prepare yourself. Yeah. You know, and I think to be okay with that. And when you get to the point where you're like, I don't need somebody. Right.
That's when
I can choose them.
And that's when they always
come. Yeah, that's when they show up. That's when God says, here you go.
That was literally my testimony. I mean, I share a lot with Sean was you know, I was trying to date prior to knowing her, dating around, trying to find the one, and, you know, who's the Christian girl that I'll be dating. It could be possibly my wife one day. And it wasn't until I finally came to a point where I said, all right, God, I know you said a man finds a wife finds a good thing. I'm done looking. I'm just going to stop looking. And I literally said out of my mouth, I'm just going to focus on you. Amen. That's all I'm going to do. And I stayed focused on him. And I said, well, you know what? I still have these thoughts in my head, so I'll just write a list. All right, you know, God, here's what I would love to have. Whatever you have for me, I wrote it out verbatim. Here's the woman of my dreams that I would just love. And I just started writing that list, and I said, I'm going to pray for her because I know you have her out there somewhere. I'm going to pray for her. Pray, you know, you send her to me or I find her or whatever, and then in walks this woman of God. Like, it was just amazing. But it was, I don't remember how long it was for me making that commitment to the Lord, not looking anymore, and then her showing up. But I just remember it was that moment where I said, I'm not going to try to look to find somebody to complete me. I'm just going to be comfortable in me being me. And it was like the beginning journey for me personally of almost getting comfortable and just being myself and being ready to just present me as God is creating me and revealing me to the world. And then that's when she showed up, and it was a perfect time to then, you know, start that friendship and start that relationship. So I don't know, I think to that point, man, it's I'm living proof. Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's really important for singles to recognize that you're comparing yourself to people in relationships without really knowing the quality of anybody else's relationship.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
so
good.
Do understand that it's actually more difficult to be in a relationship and be lonely than it is to be single and alone. There are so many people who are married and lonely.
Yeah, that's right.
And it makes sense in the mind to feel a little bit lonely when I have no one, but it is literal torture to be in a marriage and lonely because you're trapped.
Yes.
There's nowhere else you can go. Yeah. You know, so it's important that you don't assume that just because someone is with someone that someone actually has someone.
That's good.
So it's the same thing that can happen that you hear people talk about all the time, especially when they struggle with issues of depression, that you could be in a room full of people and feel totally alone. That's right. That's right. So you can be in a relationship and feel no more whole, together, filled, satisfied than you did by yourself. So be careful what you're comparing yourself to, because you really don't understand what the comparison is because you're not inside anybody else's relationship.
Wow, that's good.
So we have this tension that sometimes we don't always do what we're supposed to do, right? We don't always do what we probably should do. And what happens is we find ourselves in these predicaments where we find ourselves in toxic relationships. How do we navigate toxic relationships? I mean, personally, how do you guys think through our producer, Eric Brown, just had something go on his phone. But how do you navigate toxic relationships, things that's like, you know what, this person's probably not good for you. You're probably not good for them. And every time y'all get together, you do some things that you probably shouldn't be doing. How do you navigate those?
Or how do you identify a toxic
Yeah, let's even start there.
Yeah.
How do you identify and navigate?
What's the symptoms?
And how do you exit
Yeah.
a toxic relationship?
Red flags,
Yeah.
How do you identify those? Yeah.
Well, I say that people are only two things, and there are no neutral relationships. They're either anchors or they're air. They're either lifting you to what you are purposed to be, what you're created for, or they're tying you to everything that you used to be or never wanted to be. And so we cannot, when we find that...
Can you say that
I
one
mean,
more
come
time?
on. Like, you just
I don't want
this.
people, I'm just imagining people trying to rewind on the podcast.
I know.
You need to
She's
say
dropping
that
every nugget from a book.
One more time.
I'm like,
one more time.
There are no neutral relationships.
Yeah.
People are either anchors or they're air. They are either lifting you to everything that you're purposed to be, or they're tying you to everything you used to be or never wanted to be. So we have to make sure that we are aware of what is being brought into our lives.
Yeah.
Is this air or is this anchoring? And toxicity is anchoring. It is always in the looking behind. It's always in what you used to do. It's always in the lesser version of oneself. Wow. And when that is happening, those are relationships just like a ship. You can't move forward until you cut that anchor. You're going to have to release yourself from the anchor. There's no way to take toxic relationships and turn them into air relationships. There just isn't. It's not, there has to be a break between the two. Now, is it possible inside of a relationship that you found yourself becoming toxic one with another and you're in a marriage, for instance? And because it can happen even in a marriage. But there has to be a break of pattern, at least. An interruption, a disconnection from what we have been doing to release us to be something different. If you're dating, I fundamentally believe in the breakup. Because you're dating. You don't have to do this. Okay, this is not a covenant. So let it go. If that person, give yourselves the space to be able to heal. Is it possible for you to come back together as different kind of people? Perhaps. I'm not limiting what God can do. What I am saying, however, is that you cannot swim with that anchor still tied to your ankle.
Wow. So Avian, really quick, because something you said is so powerful, the difference between an anchor and an air. But there's some folks probably who are listening who've probably crossed some of the threshold of dating and not quite in marriage yet. But they're in this spot where we're sharing a lot of resources. We are living together. We've got a lot of stuff that is ours. But I know that there's this piece that's like, man, something is toxic about that. How do we deal with some of those toxic relationships in the midst of that tension?
Can I throw in on that, because that is a common. You know, in a church like ours, we invite everybody to the table. We invite everybody wherever you are in your journey in your life. We have people, you know, shacking up. We have people that you know, the tension in that is, I always encourage. I've encouraged people that were, you know, living together but then got engaged. Move out. Like actually, you give yourself something to look forward to. Return to abstinence. Move out. Allow there to be space for there to be a union, a covenant. I mean, the past doesn't have to dictate the future. And I think statistically, you know, you're an expert in this area, so I'm sure you could definitely affirm this, but the pattern of cohabitation before marriage is not a pattern for a successful marriage. It's a pattern in the majority of circumstances, it ends bad. And I've kind of tried to unpack that a little bit. My belief, my layman's thought on this is that you get the benefits of marriage without the covenant of marriage. And you begin the relationship saying, I'm going to get the benefits without the covenant. So after the covenant is in place, it's still almost seen as subsidiary to the benefit. And I think that it makes it much more negotiable versus having to wait. If you like it, put a ring on it. You know, that there is an actual celebration and there is something that is withheld until the covenant is established, right? And then so anyway, it's just a thought, and I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or
well, it's funny. It's just a very practical way. If I get paid for a job that I don't have to do, when I have to do the job, am I really going to work at it?
That's good.
You know,
I
was already getting paid for it. So now I even resent the fact that you actually want me to do some work. Like you were giving my paycheck was for free. I could
was
stay
easy.
home, I
Yeah,
could watch
exactly.
television, Netflix, and cash my check.
Right.
Oh,
okay,
that's
like
good.
but
Come on.
Hello.
but now you
Netflix
want
and
me to
cha-ching.
now you want me to show up and work at this thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Now I actually feel like, and this is often where people are like, you changed after we got married. Well, because yes, the expectation after marriage is not going to be the same expectation as dating. So now you feel like it was bait and switch.
Right. Oh, good.
And somehow feel betrayed by the higher level of expectation, but it's because we were pretending to be working prior to this.
Right.
So like we have to be real careful about doing these toxic relationships, these things that are outside of what, as believers, let me be clear.
Yeah.
As believers, we have to be careful about this stuff because it creates results that we don't want. So that's when I was saying freedom of choice is not freedom from consequence.
Yeah. So good.
And I often see a lot of people who are trying to get serious about a relationship. And so they'll feel like, well, if I can have my partner a little bit closer to me, we can start sharing things, we cohabitate, we want to almost have that security of feeling like they are there with me, and then we'll figure things out as we go. And so then we start ignoring red flags because, again, that idea of feeling lonely and not having anybody there. And so we kind of just deal with things because nobody's perfect. And so I almost feel like we ignore so many issues because we don't feel like it deserves that time, or we're trying to bring up stuff that's really going to ruin the mood or ruin the relationship. When in all actuality, we're ignoring these problems, covering them up, and then they explode on us, once we do get into marriage. And so I almost feel like there's just not a massive movement on, hey, bring up the dirt, like talk about the tough stuff, talk about the things that, because if you can't handle those relationships or those conversations rather, then all you're going to do is just, fluff over everything and just try to have a good time. And so the relationships are all about partying, it's all about sexual intimacy, it's all about just all the fun stuff, and you never are really able to handle any tough issues. So then when you get into marriage, it is like you changed, because now all the real issues are coming out too. So
I usually say, man, even when I'm talking to any couples, like it's the reality that we almost, if you're just beginning this dating relationship, you have to front load your relationship with hard questions. Like you have to front load it with, because the hard questions often, if they're done right, hard questions lead to deeper intimacy. It's this, man, we can talk about some real stuff, but you've got to front load it. The problem is, and this is what I've noticed, is that we'll spend 4 years getting a bachelor's degree, we'll spend 2 years getting a master's, we'll spend an additional few years getting a PhD, all of this to get a job that at some point I might even leave. But here it is, I'm engaging in this relationship that I'm looking forward to be forever, and I don't spend any time working or planning or thinking or preparing. It's like we've got to front load with the hard stuff. So
we like shortcuts. I mean, like we're now the society that likes microwaved everything. We don't, dial-up takes too long. Now if our computer takes a millisecond, we're like, what's wrong with it?
Right.
What's wrong with the Wi-Fi?
Like we have no
buffering.
patience for process anymore in our culture. You want to communicate a whole thought in 143 characters. I know people who are sexually active one with another and have never French kissed. Never. So we're already sleeping together, but we have never even done the romance of a real kiss.
Wow.
So we have become a society that just likes to skip over process. We want to purchase our degrees. We want to, everything we're trying to do in ways that shortcut the process. And what happens, just like microwave food, it's quick, it's fast, and it's poorly prepared. The nutrients are all gone. Back when we used to
Full of
do,
sodium.
back when we used to do crock pot cooking, it was the healthiest kind of cooking that we could do. It's the things that take a while that are often the healthiest for us. But we don't have the patience for the process. And when we don't do that, then what we are doing is we are primed for the pain. Because if you don't have the patience for the process, you are absolutely primed for pain. That is what's coming next.
That'll preach.
Right, listen. She made me think about a word that's really been standing out to me lately, and I've grown to love. It's that word investment.
Yeah.
It's like just making a strong investment. And I almost think about, you talked about cooking. I think about, we use expressions like you put your elbow in that, you put your foot in that. Like, it's just, you put so much of your heart into that dish that it was such an investment. It was an extension of you. And then what you got out of it was just something beautiful, something great. And so I just think about how much of an investment are we willing to make in ourselves, but as well as this relationship to ask the tough questions, to walk through the process, to not try to microwave things. Like that's a good point.
Man, so we've got like a few minutes left, but I do have to like just for fun. Someone asked this question, and I want to make sure we addressed it. Who should initiate in the relationship? When we're talking about a romantic relationship,
Don't ask Dr. Al. Don't
ask her.
She gonna
We're gonna end on this stuff. We're gonna end right here.
Don't you dare. She gonna go right into this thing. Initiate. Who's not initiating? That's what she.
Come see me if somebody isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
I'm like, whoever gets the thought first.
Right.
I'm like, what are we?
AlvinLines.com.
That's it. That's it.
What are we waiting for?
Right.
What are we waiting for? I don't think that intimacy should not have rules.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of vulnerability, is the freedom to be like, you know what? I had a real dirty thought about you today.
Right. Listen.
What time are you gonna be home? Like it doesn't require rules. Like I've got to wait for him to say something to me.
Right.
And if from a female perspective, and talking to you women out there, most men are really happy for us to initiate. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to know that you're wanted. We're not the only people who want to know that we're wanted and desired. Our men want to know that they're wanted and desired too. Yeah. We're supposed to flirt with them. I swear, if I could teach anything between couples at just a basic level, learn how to flirt with each other. Mm-hmm. Because flirtation is just it is the prelude to, it's the trailer to the movie. If Matt walks past me and he doesn't touch my butt, I say to him, go get my husband and bring him back.
Well, he like
because go get him and bring him back. Because there's an invasion of the body snatchers because you walked past me and you didn't touch me. Right. I need to know where my husband is. Right. So we're intentional about our flirtation. And one of the things that we actually just recently introduced into our marriage is I said to him, I want you to kiss me every morning before you leave. Don't pet kiss me. Kiss me. And we started that probably about 6 months ago. And
everybody late for work.
Okay.
My God.
Sir,
listen.
That's good.
It's a game changer.
That's good.
I will also say that when Pastor Freddie said this earlier, we only shower together. It is an offense and an act of war if somebody gets in the shower and didn't tell the other person that they were getting in the shower.
You're shower cheating?
What?
That's like Netflix cheating. You can't watch the Netflix episode without me.
We will come in the bathroom and be like, you mad about something I don't know about? You didn't even come get me? You didn't come get me?
Exactly.
Hilarious.
That's so funny,
And he introduced something so interesting. A couple of years back, he decided that he wanted us to pray together every morning in the shower.
Amen.
So naked before each other and naked before God.
And
every single morning, if you were to ask that man, there are 3 things that always happen. We always shower together. We always pray together, and we always make out before he goes to work. Yeah. Every single day of our lives now. And this wasn't something that we were doing at the beginning of our marriage. Mm-hmm. At different stages of our marriage, we recognized we needed to introduce different kinds of things because love learns and it evolves. Mm-hmm. So we are evolving with what it is that each of how our appetites have changed. Mm-hmm. There are things in your diet that you didn't have a taste for when you were younger that you love now. Yeah. There are things that you loved when you were younger that you don't like at all now. Yep. You have to make sure that you are constantly allowing the freedom for the evolution between you and your partners. So when we talk about initiating should be completely mutual. Yeah. It should have no rules. It should have virtually no boundaries besides the safety and emotional, spiritual, and physical safety of each other. Yeah, but outside of that, it's no holds barred. Right. God said we could have this playground, so explore the labyrinth as often as possible. That's good.
Yeah. And can I jump in on this too? Because this is really important to me. I think one of the things just to keep in mind as well is, when you have set yourself aside in purity, when you have prepared yourself in a holy, way, and so you get married. We talked about this in the previous episode, I believe, how sometimes young Christian couples, older Christian, doesn't matter how old you are, but a Christian couple who said we did this the right way, sometimes you have to rewrite the narrative around sexuality because there's been a lack of theology around healthy expression of sexuality. I would say this. I would say do each other the favor of being open and vulnerable about what pleasures you. Like, I mean, like, don't be afraid to learn from your spouse, and don't be afraid to talk to your spouse, and don't feel threatened by that. I think to give permission to that conversation between a husband and wife, to be able to have a conversation as they're learning, I mean, this is a lifelong adventure, you know. Take the time to learn. I think a lot of times when I've had the opportunity to talk to couples that are Christian couples that are having issues with intimacy and sexuality in particular, when you really lean into it, it's often because they have this almost shamed theology of it, and it becomes a function of creating children or satisfying the husband, but the husband has never been taught to learn how to actually give pleasure and satisfy his wife, and that's a holy thing, and it's never talked about. So you have a lot of very frustrated Christian couples that were like, man, we set ourselves apart, we waited, and now this is not what we thought it was what we heard about, or what is depicted on television or in these romance novels, you know, whatever. It's just, it's again, it's just like, man, just talk, just love each other enough to be vulnerable with each other, and to invite each other into learning from one another. And I think, I really believe, man, that would go so far in strengthening Christian marriages, because it's not shameful. Like, God created it. I really believe the Lord delights when He sees a husband and a wife, like, I mean, expressing their love and intimacy for one another. I don't believe we got to keep the light off and be under the cover so that, you know, He might. I think He designed us like this. I know that bothers some people to think like that and talk like that. Adam and Eve were naked in the garden and unashamed, because the covenant was pure. And so anyway, I could go on and on about this.
So we done came full circle back to sex, y'all. So just to let you know.
It needs to be talked about.
Set yourself aside.
Set yourself aside.
Do the right things the right way.
That's right.
But then go all in with each other as a couple in the covenant, and just enjoy life. Enjoy it.
Listen, you got a license, you good.
So
with your own spouse.
That's it.
Anything we're about to close it out. Any last thought on this topic? Because there's so much, y'all. I know we had a ton of questions and we didn't even get to half of them. And so this probably is something that we have to bring Dr. Albion back on again.
I'll come back
to discuss.
anytime.
Absolutely.
But any last thoughts? Anything? We can walk the table. Any last thoughts?
Well, I know we talked a lot about like sex, intimacy that way too. I know one of the things that I've been pondering on lately in my own marriage is, you know, I keep thinking about love your husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. And I know one of the simplest ways that I've learned that my wife just feels loved and feels noticed is when I come home and she's stressed out for whatever she's doing, I'll just grab her and I'll just hug her. And I'll just hold her for a while. And then I just kind of feel her just relax. I know she's picked up on it now. Just relaxes. And then Tobias, my 2-year-old, will be in another room. He's playing. He comes, he looks, he sees, and he's like, just staring, like, what are they doing? I'll just hold her. I mean, it'll be like 30, 40 seconds. We'll just sit there, and I'll start rocking side to side, like, how you doing? And she's just kind of relaxing, and he'll try to come and get between us and everything. But I just feel like it kind of like resets the mode for a second, you know? So that idea of initiation is, you know, whether it's just starting from something really small and then it goes into sexual intimacy, but just when you notice, just do it, you know? And I think, how would Christ see someone if they're stressed out, they're worried? Like, He just wants to embrace. I don't know. Just husbands, I give you that charge, man, because that's something that's really been blessing me. So.
It's good.
Good.
Yeah.
I would say that, you know, as we're talking about the array of things that are true inside of a relationship, mind, body, and spirit, that we have to remember that the mission has to be greater than the moment. We have to, when we are clear about purpose, we understand what our mission is, which is such that there's a clarity with that and intentionality about that that does not allow the moment to speak louder to us than what our mission is. If you want to have the best relationship, then don't allow the momentary doubts, fears of rejection, judgment, all of those things talk louder to you than that moment, than that mission that you have for true intimacy and real connection. So just be careful. Don't let your moment speak louder to you than that particular mission.
Good. Wow. That's good.
That's you.
No, I love everything that was said. I would just say biblical principles work.
Amen, bro. That's
and
good.
you know that God didn't create this amazing thing and then give it a bunch of rules just to make life difficult.
Yeah.
He did it so that we could actually get to enjoy the fullness.
That's powerful, man.
And I think everything we talked about, I know we talked a lot about marriage and sexuality. I honestly believe biblical principles are true across the board. And I would just simply say friendships, relationships, pay a lot of attention to the fruit of what comes out of that. You know, like love whether it's love between you and your parents, love between you and your children, love between you and your friends, love between you and your spouse. Love is about giving, not taking.
Yeah.
Amen.
And if you are in any relationship where you feel things are being taken instead of being given, you need to re-examine that and the nature of that relationship.
That's true, man.
Amen.
And there's some conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely.
And that could be with a friend. It could be with your boss at work. That's for anybody listening to this in any relationship. Love gives. Lust takes.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
So I want to throw that out there for whatever you want to apply.
That's
that
good,
to.
man. I think
Bishop Wilson?
Hey, I've got nothing. Y'all do all the great talking here. I would just say, really, allow the Lord to give your relationship grace. Allow just walking in the grace. Some of us, we're at spots where it's like, man, I'm in a toxic relationship. I'm leaving a toxic relationship. I'm in my marriage and this is not working. I'm in the dating phase and I don't know how this stuff is working. And the reality is that the Lord still, I almost feel like the Lord sees you. He sees you, he hears you, he knows you, and he's got a plan for you. It's not like this crazy, like, oh, this is never gonna happen. It's not, oh, marriage sucks, relationship sucks, everything sucks. No, it's that the Lord actually has a plan for you. And some of the tension you might be feeling is the Lord preparing you for something bigger. So, yeah, man.
Amen.
Yeah. So, hey, Dr. Alvian, please let everyone know where they can find you and all that other stuff as we get ready to close.
So, like I said before, I'm on all social media platforms. I try to keep it a little low key because I just like to, Batman it, But you can find me at alvionlyons.com, A-L-V like Victor, EANLYONS.com. On, like I said, Instagram, Facebook, all the good stuff. I'm always here to be able to serve because this is what I was born to do, to serve the body of Christ. When it comes to intimacy.
Amen.
We are grateful you are doing it. This is phenomenal, phenomenal. Hey, y'all, make sure you subscribe, like, share, all that other stuff. I think we've got more and more comments or more content coming up, and so we'd love for your feedback as well. Like, tell us what's working, what's not working. What do you want to hear more of? See y'all later.
Peace.